You've reached the lowest point more times than you can remember. You hoped someone would come to rescue you, but no one did. So you turn inward and see that this path was never meant to be walked with others, but with awareness. Push yourself to rise on your own, not with anger, but with steady calmness. In the quiet, Buddhism shows the truth. Solitude isn't a punishment, it is a teacher. Every moment you spend in silence shapes you. Every step you take alone awakens something strong within you. This isn't about running away from the world, it's about waking up inside it. By the time this video ends, you'll see that walking alone isn't loneliness, it's freedom, the choice to walk alone. There comes a point in life when no one else can take the next step for you. It's not a punishment, it's a calling. Most people avoid that moment when the noise fades and the sound of their own mind becomes too heavy to face. But that silence, that emptiness, is exactly where freedom starts. Buddhism teaches that real change begins when you dare to see things as they truly are, without decoration, without denial, without escape. And sometimes that means walking alone. To walk alone is not to reject the world, but to stop searching for yourself inside it. Solitude isn't the absence of company, it's the presence of your own awareness. When you can no longer blame anyone, and there's no one left to rescue you, you face the truth. You are responsible for your own path. In that instant, excuses fade, and discipline is born. The old masters said that no one awakens without disconnection, not from life, but from attachment. Attachment is the constant need for validation, for safety, for comfort. But detachment isn't coldness, it's freedom. To walk alone is to stop measuring your steps by the pace of others. It's to look inward and discover a strength that has always been waiting. The first step is always the hardest because it strips away every excuse. When you choose to move forward on your own, ancient fears rise. Fear of failing, of not being enough, of losing what you love. Yet those fears aren't enemies, they are gatekeepers. Buddhism teaches that suffering comes from resisting suffering. The moment you face it with awareness, it dissolves. Every fear you face turns into understanding, and understanding becomes serenity. Real solitude is not physical, it's mental. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lost, or sit alone and feel completely whole. To walk alone is to face yourself without running away from your thoughts. It's learning to sit with your mind, to observe it without being carried away. That's where training begins. Solitude becomes your dojo, your temple, your mirror. But it's not an easy path. There will be days when you want to give up, days when silence feels unbearable, days when distractions try to drag you back. That's when the true test begins, to stay. That persistence, that quiet consistency, is what separates survival from awakening. Each time you choose presence over distraction, you strengthen your mind. And a stable mind is the foundation of true freedom. To walk alone isn't to abandon love or friendship or human connection. It's learning not to depend on them for peace, because when peace relies on something outside you, it becomes fragile. When it comes from within, it becomes unbreakable. The path of Buddhism doesn't ask you to isolate yourself. It asks you to realize that nothing is missing. What you seek has always been within you, waiting to be seen. In the end, the decision to walk alone is the decision to awaken. It's not a cry of rebellion, but an act of understanding. It's to look at life and say, I don't need the world to change for me to be at peace. I just need to be at peace with the world as it is. That realization doesn't happen in noise or crowds or distraction. It happens in stillness, in honesty, in silence. Each step you take alone reminds you that there's no greater journey than the one toward yourself, and the one who truly knows themselves is never alone, because they've stopped searching for what was never lost. To walk alone is, in truth, to come home. Discipline, the silent ally. Most people see discipline as a burden, a form of restriction. But in the Buddhist path, discipline is compassion, the act of caring for yourself with firmness. When you decide to walk alone, discipline stops being an obligation and becomes an act of love. It's not about control, it's about clarity. It's not a chain, but a key. In the monastery, every gesture is a lesson. Monks wake before dawn, sweep the floor, prepare tea, meditate. Not because someone orders them to, but because each simple act is a way to train the mind. To repeat something day after day without complaint teaches humility, patience, and presence. That's true discipline, doing what must be done, even when no one is watching, even when no one will ever applaud. In our modern world, we confuse discipline with pressure. We push ourselves with anger, chasing results, and when they don't come, we collapse. But Buddhism teaches that all transformation takes time. A seed does not become a tree overnight, yet every day it does what it must. It grows. Inner discipline is that quiet, steady growth. It's choosing what's right even when it brings no reward, because you trust that change is happening in silence. An undisciplined mind seeks constant pleasure and distraction. It jumps from one thought to another like a restless monkey. Training the mind is learning to watch that movement without judgment, to gently bring it back to the present. Every time you return, every time you resist the pull of distraction, your awareness strengthens. Each moment of mindfulness is an act of discipline. When you walk alone, there's no external structure to lean on. No one tells you when to move, when to rest, or what to do. That's where the challenge begins. You must become your own guide. At first, it feels like wandering in the dark, but when you learn to be your own teacher, you discover a new kind of freedom, the strength of self-mastery. You no longer depend on motivation or recognition. You act because you understand. And understanding gives you peace. The ancient texts speak of balance, energy, and calm. Too much energy, and the mind burns out. Too much calm, and it falls asleep. Discipline is the middle way, the steady flame that neither rages nor fades. It's not tension, it's steadiness. To practice discipline is to build a mind that doesn't break when the world shakes. You can train it in the simplest things. When you eat, eat mindfully. When you speak, speak with awareness. When you walk, feel every step. Life itself becomes the monastery, and each act a meditation. You no longer need incense or robes, only attention. What once felt like routine becomes practice. What once felt like exhaustion becomes clarity. People often mistake discipline for repression, but they are opposites. Repression comes from fear. Discipline comes from understanding. Repression hardens you. Discipline refines you. One closes the heart, the other opens it. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's being conscious of every choice. When you stay consistent, even on the days you don't feel like it, something inside you changes. It's subtle, almost invisible, but powerful. Your mind steadies, your body softens, your heart quiets. The calm that comes from discipline isn't dependent on results. It's self-created, indestructible. When you walk alone, discipline becomes your closest companion. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply waits. Every day it offers you the same choice, stay or surrender. And every day you stay, you strengthen your freedom. Because when the mind is firm, life no longer feels like a storm. Discipline doesn't distance you from the world. It teaches you how to live within it, fully awake. The Zen story, the pilgrim and the mountain. Long ago, at the foot of a quiet mountain, there stood a small temple. A young pilgrim arrived there after many weeks of travel. His feet were bleeding, his heart heavy, and his mind restless. He had crossed valleys, rivers, and cities, searching for one thing, the secret to inner peace. When he saw the old master sweeping the temple floor, he knelt and said, "Master, I've walked for weeks to find the truth. Please teach me the way to enlightenment." The master looked up, smiled gently and replied, "Climb the mountain, then come back when you reach the top." The pilgrim hesitated. The sun was hot, the climb steep. Still he bowed and began his ascent. At first the path was easy. Then the stones grew sharper, the air thinner and his doubts louder. Halfway up he stopped, exhausted. Looking at the clouds wrapped around the summit, he muttered, "Why did he send me here? What could I possibly find up there?" He thought about turning back, about the comfort of the village, the warmth of company. But then a small, quiet voice inside whispered, "Keep walking." And so he did. Every step hurt, every breath burned. But with each moment of struggle, the noise in his mind began to fade. The complaints, the fears, the comparisons, they started to fall away like loose stones rolling down the path. When he finally reached the top, there was no temple waiting for him, no master, no revelation, only silence, only the wind, only himself. For the first time, he didn't ask for answers. He sat breathing, surrounded by clouds. In that stillness, he felt something shift. He realized that the climb had never been about the mountain. It had been about everything he had to let go of to reach this silence. The summit was not a destination. It was a mirror. Every struggle, every doubt, every step had shown him who he really was. When the pilgrim descended, he walked slowly, peacefully. At the temple gate, the master was still sweeping the floor. The pilgrim bowed and said, "Master, I climbed to the top, but I didn't find enlightenment." The old man smiled and answered, "Yet your eyes already carry the light." The pilgrim froze. Then he understood. The journey hadn't given him enlightenment. It had stripped away what kept him from seeing it. The mountain had always been inside him. From that day on, the pilgrim stopped searching for temples on distant horizons. He found his practice in every step, his peace in every breath. Each time fear whispered, he remembered that small voice within, the one that had said, "Keep walking." And so he did, because the true path is never about reaching the top. It's about awakening on the way up. Conscious solitude. When no one walks beside you, after you've climbed enough mountains, silence becomes familiar. At first it feels like emptiness, a hollow echo where laughter and noise used to be. You reach for distractions, for comfort, for company. But the more you fill the silence, the louder it becomes. Then you stop, you listen, and slowly you begin to understand. Solitude isn't something to escape from, it's something to enter. Buddhism teaches that conscious solitude is the ground where awakening grows. When you stop running, you start hearing, not the world outside, but the quiet voice within. It speaks softly, beneath the chaos of thought, beneath the memories and fears. To hear it, you must first be still enough to listen. Most people mistake being alone for being empty, but they are not the same. Being alone is a state. Emptiness is a thought. You can sit in a crowded room and feel invisible, or sit under a tree, completely alone, and feel whole. The difference lies in your relationship with yourself. Conscious solitude is not loneliness, it's meeting yourself without judgment. It's watching your mind, seeing your emotions rise and fall, without chasing or resisting them. At first it hurts, old wounds reopen, forgotten fears resurface. You might feel like you're breaking, but you're not breaking, you're unfolding. Awareness acts like sunlight through fog. It doesn't fight the fog, it simply illuminates it, and once the light touches it, the fog fades on its own. In the same way, when you bring awareness to your pain, the stories that once ruled your mind begin to lose their power. To walk alone is to finally hear the sound of your own soul. It's no longer about escaping noise, it's about understanding it. You realize that peace doesn't mean silence around you, it means silence within you. The masters used to say, when you learn to be alone, you stop being separate. It sounds like a riddle, but it's true. In deep solitude, you feel the pulse of everything. The same breath that fills your lungs fills the sky. The same stillness inside you exists in the trees, the rivers, the stars. You are alone, yet connected to all that is. From that awareness, solitude turns into sanctuary. You no longer need to escape the world or chase affection. You can sit in an empty room and feel peace. You can walk through a storm and feel steady. Because you've learned to listen, not with your ears but with your being, every moment alone becomes practice. You stop waiting for others to make you feel whole. You stop needing approval to feel seen. And in that simplicity, a deeper joy appears, quiet, weightless, unshakable. When the pilgrim from the mountain learned to rest at his own silence, he stopped seeking enlightenment in temples or masters. He found it in the space between thoughts. He realized he had never truly been alone, because awareness itself was always there, watching, breathing, being. Conscious solitude is not learned from books. It is lived moment by moment. It is the art of staying when every instinct says to run, and when you finally stay long enough, you discover that the silence you feared was never empty. It was full of you, letting go the real strength within. Everything you love will change. Everything you hold will one day slip through your fingers. Everything you fear will eventually fade away. It sounds cruel, but it's not. It's the truth of impermanence, and within it lies the key to freedom. Buddhism doesn't teach resignation, it teaches release. It reminds us that nothing in life can be kept, not people, not moments, not even ourselves. When you see this clearly, attachment begins to lose its grip. Attachment isn't love, it's the fear of losing love. It's the attempt to freeze something that was meant to move. We cling to people, to memories, to ideas of who we should be, and each time we hold tighter, we suffer more. Because life is not a statue, it's a river. Letting go doesn't mean coldness, it means loving without trying to possess. It means being present without trying to control. It's the ability to say thank you instead of don't leave. True strength doesn't come from holding on, it comes from understanding. The more you try to control life, the more fragile you become. When you let go, a quiet power rises within you. It's the calm of someone who knows that everything changes, and that's precisely why it's precious. The masters say attachment is like holding a rope that's burning your hands. The more you resist, the more it hurts. And when you finally let go, the pain turns into peace. That lightness you feel isn't loss, it's liberation. But letting go doesn't happen overnight. It's a practice, a softening. First you see what binds you, the need to be understood, the fear of being alone, the obsession with outcomes, the illusion of control. Then, slowly you learn to observe those impulses without feeding them. You don't fight them, you let them pass, like clouds drifting across the sky. And as you do, you realize something miraculous. The sky was always clear. Walking alone forces you to face everything you cling to. Without distraction, you meet your attachments face to face. You see what rules your mind and what keeps you small. And through awareness, you begin to free yourself. You stop escaping life and start living it. Letting go doesn't make you distant. It makes you deep. It teaches you to love without fear, to act without desperation, to live without needing guarantees. Because real strength isn't about being unshaken. It's about being open. It's the power to remain at peace, even as the world moves around you. When you can hold your heart open in the middle of impermanence, nothing can destroy you. Not because you've become hard, but because you've become soft. Pain still comes, but it doesn't rule you. Loss still visits, but it doesn't define you. You breathe, you feel, and you let go. The pilgrim, after returning from the mountain, realized that even his search for enlightenment was an attachment. He had been trying to get something from life: wisdom, peace, answers. But when he stopped chasing and simply sat in stillness, the search ended and peace appeared. He learned that peace doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from wanting less. Letting go isn't weakness, it's mastery. Each time you release something that doesn't serve you, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And when there's nothing left to cling to, you finally discover that you were never missing anything at all. Turning adversity into a teacher. No one escapes pain. Everyone at some point will be broken open by life, by loss, by change, by time. But what separates awakening from despair isn't how much you suffer. It's how you meet your suffering. Buddhism teaches that pain is not your enemy. Pain is a messenger. It comes not to punish you, but to reveal you, to show what still needs to be understood, accepted, or let go. Our first reaction is always to resist. When something hurts, we run, we distract ourselves, we blame. But each time you run from pain, it becomes stronger. It follows you silently, waiting to be noticed. The moment you face it, not with anger, but with awareness, it begins to fade. Because pain cannot survive in the light of understanding. In the monasteries, they say suffering is like fire that purifies gold. If you avoid the fire, you stay covered in impurities. If you stay in it with awareness, you come out pure, bright, and unbreakable. Suffering itself is not the transformation. Awareness through suffering is. Every hardship becomes a mirror. When you lose something, it teaches you detachment. When someone hurts you, it teaches you compassion. When fear appears, it teaches you presence. Every difficulty holds a lesson, but only for those who stay long enough to learn it. Adversity is not here to destroy you. It is here to remove what is not truly you, to reveal the quiet strength that exists beneath all illusion. What burns away is not real. What remains is truth. A mind that has learned to sit in silence can face any storm. Because when the wind rises, the roots of awareness keep you steady. You no longer ask, "Why me?" You start to ask, "What is this teaching me?" That small shift changes everything. Suffering becomes a guide, not a punishment. The pilgrim learned this as well. After coming down from the mountain, he met many challenges: doubt, loss, exhaustion. For a long time, he tried to understand his pain, but the more he analyzed it, the heavier it felt. One evening, he went to the old master and said, "Master, the more I try to understand my suffering, the more it grows." The master smiled and said, "Then stop trying to understand it. Feel it. When you stop analyzing pain and simply experience it, it turns into wisdom." The pilgrim bowed, and from that day on, he stopped fighting what hurt. He let it move through him like rain through the earth, and slowly peace began to grow where pain once lived. Adversity doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for presence. If you can stay aware even when life burns, the fire no longer feels like an enemy, it becomes light. Because the truth is simple, life doesn't need you to be strong every moment, it only asks you to stay awake. When you realize this, you stop seeing hardship as punishment and begin to see it as practice. Everything you face is preparing you for freedom. This is how freedom becomes part of you, walking alone yet still connected. After all the distance, all the silence, and all the lessons, you realize something deep. Walking alone never meant being alone. It meant learning to stand in the middle of life without losing yourself. In the beginning, you searched for meaning. You climbed, you fell, you struggled. But now, you don't need to chase anything anymore. You've stopped asking the world to change so you can feel peaceful. Instead, you've learned to find peace in the world just as it is. True freedom isn't about leaving society behind. It isn't found only in mountains or temples. It's found in simple, everyday moments, washing a cup, breathing, speaking with kindness. When the mind is quiet, every action becomes sacred. The sacred isn't somewhere far away. It's right here, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. To integrate freedom is to move through the noise without letting it consume you, to stay gentle in a harsh world, to remain calm in the middle of chaos. You no longer need to escape life. You can finally live it. This is what the Masters meant by awakening. It's not about rising above the world. It's about returning to it, awake, aware, and free. When you truly understand, solitude becomes unity. You see that every person you meet is a reflection of the same awareness that lives within you, the same light, the same silence, the same longing for peace. The walls between you and others disappear, and what remains is simple compassion. The pilgrim from the mountain discovered this too. Years later, a young seeker came to him and asked, "Master, how can I find enlightenment?" The old pilgrim smiled softly and said, "Walk alone. But remember, we all walk together." That is the heart of awakening, to walk your path with awareness, to welcome silence without fear, to love without holding on, to live without resisting life. You are no longer waiting to be saved because you have learned to meet yourself. And once you meet yourself, you meet everything. So if you've reached this moment, take a breath. You've come a long way. Maybe without noticing it, you've already started your own climb. This is your reminder. You don't need more noise, more approval, or more certainty. You only need presence. You are already enough. You are already home. Now share this message with someone who might need it. Leave a comment about which part of this journey touched you. Maybe your words will guide someone still climbing their own mountain. And if you want to continue on this path of awareness and reflection, subscribe, stay close, and keep listening to the silence. Because in the end, walking alone doesn't separate you from the world. It connects you to everything real. And that is freedom.